many, being a famous actor in film and television is the ultimate dream. Glamorous parties, huge premieres, more money than you could ever imagine. For those outside of the acting bubble, it doesn't get much better. However, it's important to remember that for those who do it day in and day out, it can be just a job. Acting is legitimately how some people pay the bills, and like all of us, you have your good days at work and your bad days. One of the pitfalls of hating a movie shoot is that there is a chance millions of people could pay to watch you have an absolutely dreadful time. Most actors are pretty good at hiding their frustrations, but others, well, they end up on lists like these. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with What Culture, here with actors who visibly hated these movie roles. Jeremy Irons in Dungeons & Dragons. One particularly disastrous big screen adaptation of the game came out in 2000 and starred acclaimed actor Jeremy Irons, among others. Irons played Profion, a member of the Council of Mages. He's the film's main villain, as he and his group attempt to steal a scepter that will give them the power to do something. Look, it's hard to pay attention when the movie is this rubbish, alright? Someone who clearly agreed that the movie wasn't worth his time was Irons himself. The actor is clearly checked out in all of his scenes, drawing on his natural ability to phone in a half-assed performance. Dungeons & Dragons is not often talked about in conjunction with Irons' lengthy career, possibly because he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else than on set. Perhaps he knew that the film was going to be a flop, although you didn't need to be a wizard to see that coming.
Jennifer Lawrence, Dark Phoenix. X-Men fans were thrilled when the on-the-rise Jennifer Lawrence was cast to play Mystique in X-Men First Class. And though she definitely did a fine job in her first time up to bat, that enthusiasm became less apparent with each subsequent sequel. Lawrence's star profile soared when she starred in The Hunger Games the year after First Class. And another year later, she won the Best Actress Oscar for her performance in Silver Linings Playbook. Now, Lawrence was game enough in 2014's X-Men Days of Future Past, but by the time X-Men Apocalypse rolled around 2 years later, it was clear she was only involved for a contractually obligated paycheck. Due to Lawrence's disdain for the makeup process, she spends huge portions of Apocalypse looking like, well, Jennifer Lawrence. And despite Lawrence's clear desire to take the money and run, her fame meant that Fox wanted to give her a marquee role, regardless of how little she actually wanted it. This led to the franchise ending Dark Phoenix, where a fully checked out Lawrence sleepwalked her way through reams of admittedly atrocious dialogue, where she honestly couldn't have looked more bored or embarrassed if she tried. Mercifully, Mystique is killed halfway through that movie after getting a relatively scant amount of screen time. But every second she is in the movie, you can just sense her eagerness not to be involved at all. We know Jennifer Lawrence wasn't a big fan of being a superhero in the end, but I want to know right now, what actor do you want to see take on a superhero role in the future? You let me know in the comments section down below.
Dennis Hopper in Super Mario Bros. In a similar vein to Dungeons & Dragons, the 1993 Super Mario Bros. Film took a beloved part of nerd culture and made everyone hate it, even the nerds. You could honestly make a case for any of the cast members hating being involved in this dreadful affair, but the one we've singled out also played the main baddie of the piece. Dennis Hopper appeared as King Koopa in this film. No, not Bowser. That would imply he was some sort of giant lizard creature with a shell on his back. Instead, the villain of this Mario movie was a man. Yeah, he looked a bit like a dinosaur, but he was ostensibly still just a regular bloke. Jack Black has a very low bar. Let's just keep it at that. Hopper treated this ridiculous character with all the care it deserved, aka none. He looked utterly miserable whilst playing the part, which was an accurate reflection of anyone who rented this movie thinking it would be anything like the games. The star has admitted that he only did this film for the money, but whatever they paid him, it wasn't enough.
Edward Norton, The Italian Job. Edward Norton has never been quiet about the fact that he only appeared in 2003's remake of The Italian Job because of a contractual requirement with Paramount. As a young man, Norton signed a 3-picture deal with the studio, with the first film being his breakthrough movie Primal Fear, which resulted in his first Oscar nomination too. Norton kept rejecting other movies Paramount offered him within the deal, until he and the studio came to an agreement that he would only have to star in one additional movie to fulfill the contract. Paramount offered Norton the villain role in The Italian Job, and after he refused, they effectively litigated him into appearing for a mere $1 million, compared to his usual $10 million fee at the time. Still not a bad paycheck. And watching the movie, Norton's displeasure is palpable throughout. It's not fair to say that he gives a bad performance, but given just how much he cares about his work in projects he actually wants to work on, this is probably the closest to phoning it in that he's ever done. He looks utterly miserable, and not merely in the way that a villain's supposed to look. There's nothing behind the eyes to suggest he's remotely engaged with the role that he's playing on screen. One of Norton's lawyers perhaps put it best: if you want the best possible performance and the best possible movie, you wouldn't want to force an actor of his caliber to perform against his will. And that's what they did, so you get what you get.
Keanu Reeves in The Watcher. To give Keanu Reeves his credit, which is something we all love to do, the Matrix star had a very good reason not to be invested in making The Watcher. Reeves had originally turned down the script for this movie, but then the film's director, Joe Charbonnick, forged his signature on the contract. Forget the film, that's the real story right there. Rather than face a lengthy legal battle, Reeves just agreed to do the movie, proving to us all that he is in fact just Ted in real life. As it turned out, the part Reeves would be playing against his will was that of David Alan Griffin, a serial killer being hunted by an FBI special agent played by James Spader. Presumably, he was wanted on the charges of bad acting because Reeves really phones this one in. In all honesty though, can you blame him? The man had just had weeks of his life signed away by someone who used to be his friend. Cut him some slack. At least he got an increased share of the box office cut as a result of the whole contract malarkey.
Harrison Ford, Ender's Game. Harrison Ford has a bit of a reputation for being a curmudgeon, but when the guy cares about a movie, you can really tell. Case in point, Star Wars The Force Awakens and especially Blade Runner 2049. Awesome movies. And though Ford only appears in roughly one film a year these days, a lot of his performances over the last 15 years or so generally feature the actor in various degrees of anguish at having been dragged onto a film set, courtesy of a dump truck full of money. No example is more egregious than Ender's Game. An honestly not that bad sci-fi romp which casts Ford as the stern Colonel Hiram Graff. On paper, it seems like a fine enough role for Ford's grumpy proclivities, and yet he spends the entirety of his time in the movie looking desperate for a nap. Ford maintains a flat monotone for basically the entire movie, and just looks like he'd rather be anywhere else but a film set. You could argue that he's simply trying to embody Graff's emotional reserve from the source material, but it's far easier to believe that the guy just didn't really care about this particular role, and simply took the part to buy himself a new plane or something. You do you, Harrison.
Tessa Thompson in Thor Love and Thunder. For some, the Marvel Cinematic Universe came off the rails with the phenomenally average Black Widow. Others came to this realization a little later with Eternals, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, or Thor Love and Thunder. The movie, which bafflingly wasn't called Thor 4 and then stylized with the 4 replaced in the O, saw Chris Hemsworth return to his role as the God of Thunder to do battle with Christian Bale's Gore the God Butcher. Helping out the blonde-haired Adonis are his ex-girlfriend Jane, who has somehow turned into him, big rock monster Korg, and the new leader of Asgard, King Valkyrie. Valkyrie is played by Tessa Thompson, who is usually very good, but looked as though she'd had just about enough of this superhero business in Love and Thunder. She wasn't nearly as energetic as in the last Thor movie, adding very little to a story that was pretty bare bones to start with.
Dakota Johnson, 50 Shades of Grey. It is pretty obvious from the 50 Shades movies and their accompanying press tours that neither Dakota Johnson nor Jamie Dornan knew quite what they were signing up for with these movies. Though Dornan's contempt for the films is at least buried underneath the smouldering, guarded nature of his character. Johnson? Well, not so much. Hilariously, as bookish intern Anastasia Steele, Johnson spends the vast majority of her screen time across the film squirming at the ridiculous dialogue she's forced to read with something resembling a straight face. There's a slight but sure self-awareness in her performance, where you can practically sense her rolling her eyes as she rattles through E.L. James' howlingly corny, romantic prose. Because breaking the fourth wall and literally looking at the audience sadly isn't allowed. Johnson has since explained to Vanity Fair that making these movies was a bit of a creative battle behind the scenes, as author James demanded that certain things happen. With the actor saying if I had known at the time that's what it was gonna be like, I don't think anyone would have done it. It would have been like, oh, this is psychotic. And the evidence of that is plastered right across her face throughout the movies. Thankfully, Johnson quickly distanced herself from 50 Shades by giving an acclaimed performance in Luca Guadagnino's Suspiria remake. So between her critical plaudits and the millions she earned from the series, She hopefully won't need to put herself through such agonizing self-debasement ever again. You know, after Madam Web. Bill Murray Scrooged. Now, it is fair to say that Bill Murray has built his brand on playing thoroughly disagreeable characters. Though, what separates a miserable character from just a miserable performance is the context in between. Ghostbusters' Peter Venkman and Groundhog Day's Phil Connors may be a-holes, but the human being underneath is always there. The same can't quite be said for Murray's performance in 1988's Christmas comedy Scrooged. A perfectly enjoyable film, albeit one where Murray doesn't seem to be having much fun at all. Roger Ebert perhaps put it best in his one-star review of the film. Here it is. Frank Cross is a thoroughly miserable wretch played by Murray in a thoroughly miserable mood. What seems to be missing are the lightness and good cheer that lurk beneath the surface of most Murray performances. He's often gruff in his movies, but in a way that lets you know he's just kidding. This time he doesn't seem to be kidding. Murray's ill humour affects the chemistry of scene after scene, introducing a kind of undertow. When he shouts at people, he doesn't add a little spin of self-mocking exaggeration, so that we know to laugh. He seems to be really shouting, and the other actors look as if they really feel shouted at. If the acerbic nature of Murray's performance seems to point to an actor suffering for our entertainment, he confirmed as much when he caught up with Ebert a few years later to confront him about his review of the movie. Ebert asked if there were on-set disagreements with director Richard Donner, and Murray replied, "Only a few every single minute of the day. That could have been a really great movie. The script was so good. There's maybe one take in the final cut movie that is mine. We made it so fast, it was like doing a movie live. He kept telling me to do things louder. I think he was deaf. Ouch." Unlike most of the movies on this list, Scrooged is actually pretty entertaining, to be honest. Regardless of the fact that Murray himself looks like he actually wants to murder someone for real throughout. Presumably Donna. Thank you very much for stopping on by to check out this video today, my friend, and hopefully you're not visibly hating it. If so, then tap on that subscribe button down below and you will get more of these What Culture videos in your day.
Michelle Williams in Venom. Venom was a film so bad, Sony had to make Morbius so it wouldn't be their worst movie anymore. Starring Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock, it tells the story of a former reporter who must work together with the murderous alien symbiote that is cohabiting his body. Part of Brock's motivations is his plan to win back ex-girlfriend Anne, as played by the fantastic Michelle Williams. As is always the case with partners in these sorts of films, Anne ends up getting drawn into the mayhem and even bonds with the symbiote herself at one point. Williams has also confessed to having precisely zero clue as to what was happening in her movie. Maybe her and Anthony Hopkins can form a talented people forced to be in terrible sci-fi films support group. It's clear that her heart just isn't in this picture, as she gives a flat rendition of what is, to be fair, a flat character. Although, unlike with Sir Anthony, her character was back for the sequel.
Natalie Portman, Thor: The Dark World. Natalie Portman didn't exactly give a stellar performance as Jane Foster in the first Thor, but at least there wasn't the sense that she was only in the movie to avoid being sued into oblivion by Marvel Studios. Thor: The Dark World, however, was a whole other story. Portman was initially excited about appearing in the sequel when Patty Jenkins was hired to helm, which would have made her the first woman to direct a major superhero movie. We're not counting Punisher Warzone, okay? However, due to the ever-popular creative differences, Jenkins was eventually let go, and Game of Thrones' Alan Taylor was hired to replace her, leaving Portman furious and reportedly even eager to quit the project altogether. But skipping out on a Marvel Studios contract is no picnic, folks, and so Portman took her lumps and appeared in the sequel against her wishes, as is hilariously obvious in the movie itself. Now, there are many things wrong with one of the MCU's worst movies, but Portman's comatose performance is especially problematic, given that Jane is a pivotal part of the film's plot. Hell, the post-credits scene where Jane is reunited with Thor was shot with a double, Hemsworth's wife Elsa Pataki, funnily enough, because Portman wasn't available / couldn't be bothered. She thankfully seemed way more interested in her proper MCU return that was Thor: Love and Thunder though. And Mighty Thor was actually one of the best parts of that generally silly experience. What a journey.
Robert Pattinson in the Twilight series. When it comes to actors taking dumps on their own movies, few can hold a candle to the shower of excrement Robert Pattinson has buried the Twilight films in over the years. Edward Cullen himself has said all sorts of hilariously nasty things about the franchise, including that the books the movies are based on should never have been published. Ouch. Our Pats's apathy towards the world of vampires is plain as day if you sit down and watch the films. We understand that Edward's character is meant to be aloof, but after reading some of the star's comments, we're not sure how much acting actually went into his turn on screen. As fun as it is for sites like ours to take the Twilight films to task, at least we didn't get paid millions of dollars for starring in them. Pattinson can feel how he wants to feel, but it is extremely unprofessional to be this callous about your own work. You don't see Daniel Radcliffe doing this to Harry Potter, do you? Mainly because those films are actually good, but still.
Will Arnett, Show Dogs. Show Dogs is one of the worst movies to be released in cinemas in the last decade. Following an FBI agent who teams up with a police dog to go undercover at a dog show and rumble an animal smuggling ring. Yep. As brilliantly funny as Will Arnett can be, even he is unable to do anything whatsoever to elevate this film. And as evidenced by his total non-event of a performance, he doesn't even try. His only real piece of acting in the film is hiding an ongoing existential crisis as he ponders whether his salary for the movie, which with its mere $5.5 million budget couldn't have been that much, was worth the dignity that was lost. Arnett is in total take the money and run mode here, looking completely disinterested, bored, and perhaps even vaguely annoyed that he's in this movie. Mercifully, Show Dogs was a modest success at best, so it's unlikely he'll be lured back for a sequel anytime soon.
Wesley
Bridges R.I.P.D. Jeff Bridges is one of the greatest actors of all time, people. And though he has appeared in his fair share of duds over the decades, he can almost never be accused of mailing a performance in. Almost. In 2013's sci-fi comedy dud R.I.P.D., however, Bridges' performance as undead US Marshal Roy Pulsifer was delivered from several continents away. Though it's clear to see why Bridges was cast as the rootin' tootin' monster hunter, there is nothing here for him beyond a payday, and he clearly knows it. Bridges does the only thing an actor can in this situation. He hams it up, yet in an utterly joyless and lazy way that makes it clear he just wants to get through the work and move on. Bridges may have made an art out of grumbling throughout his career, but in R.I.P.D. there's a genuine listlessness to his performance, and not even pairing him with a similarly stranded eventual merc with a mouth Ryan Reynolds does much to help here.
Daniel Craig in Spectre. With 2021's No Time to Die, Daniel Craig bowed out of his role as James Bond. After first leading up the mega franchise in 2006, Craig left it in spectacular fashion to free up his schedule to play flamboyant Southern detectives. No Time to Die was a famously troubled picture. Original director Danny Boyle left the project and the release date was pushed back several times due to the pandemic. For Craig personally, he was also battling burnout with the character, caused by the previous Bond iteration's Spectre. In 2015, Craig played the super spy for the fourth time, and it was awful. Spectre was both convoluted and boring at the same time, not helped by the fact that its main star was clearly flagging. Craig said he felt dejected whilst filming the movie, thanks in part to an injury he received on set. This attitude was reflected in his performance, which one reviewer called bored. James Bored. Thankfully, the blue-eyed agent perked up for the sequel and gave his version of Bond a fitting send-off. However, there was a time when it looked like his character was going to go on one hell of a downer. 00 no.
January Jones, X-Men First Class. As terrific as X-Men First Class generally was, there was a single performance in the movie that was taken to task by critics and fans alike. January Jones' utterly listless, unfussed turn as mutant Emma Frost. Though Jones did a marvellous job playing put-upon housewife Betty Draper on Mad Men, she basically played Frost like a fembot, completely lacking in anything approaching believable human effect with every single one of her totally flat line readings. Now, while you can argue that this was simply a misguided acting tick on Jones' part, her completely morose mood throughout the film suggests she was only there for the money. Granted, Jones was forced into an eye-rollingly skimpy collection of outfits to play the part, so you can't really blame her for being a bit pissed off about the blatant sexism of it all, even if she mistakenly let her clear misery define the hollow, soulless performance itself. Doesn't stop the movie being ace though, I've got to say, I love that thing.
Oscar Isaac in Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. Oh, Poe Dameron, we all had such high hopes for you. This dashing Resistance pilot was set up to be the next Han Solo with his rugged good looks, devil-may-care attitude, and skills with a pistol. Unfortunately, he was more akin to Han when he was frozen in carbonite, bland, inoffensive, and essentially just a bit of window dressing. The penny really dropped in the final installment of the wretched Disney trilogy, The Rise of Skywalker. Despite playing a fairly elevated role in The Last Jedi, Dameron was just another soldier in this one, no better than a stormtrooper. Actor Oscar Isaac must have been in a headspace far, far away during shooting, because he comes across as anything but invested in what his character is up to. The pinnacle of this is the now infamous scene where Poe declares that Palpatine is back somehow. They literally just left it at somehow. No wonder Isaac couldn't give Porg's left wing about this series anymore. The actor has already said he probably won't come back to Star Wars, and who can really blame him?